In the dead silence of the chapel, I began to sing. The hymn wasn't on the program, wasn't on the printed sheet, and certainly wasn't what he wanted. When his hand struck me in front of our relatives, he had no idea who had asked me to sing, or why that song was the key to unlocking every secret buried beneath the coffin lid. The church's livestream camera was still rolling. Evidence was being recorded. The sealed letter remained in the pastor's pocket, waiting for the right moment. Revenge, I learned, sometimes means simply doing what the deceased asked, and letting the living expose themselves before the entire town. My name is Ava Hart, and I've spent the last 3 days watching my stepfather orchestrate my mother's funeral like a corporate merger. Every flower arrangement, every hymn selection, every minute of the service had been vetted through his personal filter of what was appropriate for the Morton family image. The morning light filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Brigid's Chapel, casting fractured rainbows across the mahogany casket where my mother, Eleanor Hart, lay in eternal rest. She'd fought cancer for 2 years before losing the battle at Alder Hospice just 5 days ago. Now, Caleb Morton, her husband of 8 years and my stepfather by unfortunate circumstance, stood at the pulpit reviewing his notes one final time before the guests arrived. "The processional will begin at exactly 10 o'clock, he announced to the funeral director, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone he used when closing deals for his headstone and construction business. "No deviations from the program. We're live streaming this for Eleanor's distant relatives, and I won't have anything unexpected." His eyes found mine across the chapel, cold and calculating. At 32, I'd learned to read the subtext in Caleb's carefully chosen words. Unexpected meant anything that might challenge his narrative of the grieving. Devoted husband. It meant any mention of how he'd systematically isolated my mother from her old church choir friends. It meant any reference to the final weeks when he'd controlled every visitor, every phone call, every decision about her care. I adjusted my black dress, purchased specifically because Caleb had deemed my original choice too casual for a Morton family event, and walked toward the altar where my mother's photograph stood, surrounded by white lilies. She was young in the picture, maybe 25, wearing her choir robe and holding a hymnal. Her smile radiated the kind of joy I hadn't seen in years. "She loved to sing," I said quietly, more to her photo than to anyone else. "Yes, well, we have professional singers for the service," Caleb replied. Suddenly beside me, "Everything has been arranged according to the highest standards. Your mother would have wanted dignity, not amateur performances." The words stung, but I'd grown accustomed to his barbs disguised as concern. In my work as a compliance specialist at Harborline Compliance Group, I'd learned to spot manipulation dressed up as procedure. Caleb was a master at it. Father Doyle entered through the side door, his weathered face bearing the weight of 40 years of funerals. He caught my eye and nodded slightly, a gesture so small Caleb missed it entirely. "Miss Hart," the priest said, approaching us. "I wanted to confirm the musical selections for the service." Caleb intercepted before I could speak. "Everything is in the program. Father, we've hired Ms. Pemberton from the Riverton Symphony to perform. The hymns are listed in order." Father Doyle's fingers brushed the edge of his jacket pocket, a nervous gesture I'd noticed him make several times since yesterday's rehearsal. "Of course, Mr. Morton," though I do recall Eleanor mentioning her favorite hymn was "Nearer, My Home." She sang it in our choir back in her younger days. "That's not on the program," Caleb said flatly. "We've selected more appropriate pieces. Amazing Grace, How Great Thou Art, classics everyone knows." "Mom loved Nearer, My Home," I interjected. "She hummed it during her treatments." Caleb's jaw tightened. "The program is finalized. Ava, the printing is done. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to brief the ushers." As he strode away, Father Doyle lingered. "Your mother was a special woman," he said softly. "She had specific wishes about her service." Before I could ask what he meant, Caleb's voice boomed across the chapel. "Father, a word about the eulogy parameters." The priest sighed and walked toward my stepfather. but not before I caught him touching his pocket again. Something was in there, something that made him nervous around Caleb. I returned to my mother's photograph, remembering her voice, even when the chemo had stolen her hair and the pain medication clouded her thoughts. She could still carry a tune. In her final week at the hospice, when words became difficult, she'd hummed, always the same melody, always nearer, my home. The chapel began filling with guests, Caleb's business associates in the front rows, my mother's few remaining friends relegated to the back. I recognized Maribel Ortiz, the hospice nurse who'd cared for Mom in her final days. She gave me a meaningful look and subtly tapped her purse. The pieces of a puzzle I didn't yet understand were falling into place. Father Doyle's nervous pocket-touching, Maribel's significant glances, the way Caleb had systematically excluded anyone who'd known my mother before their marriage from the funeral planning. As the organ began its somber prelude, I took my assigned seat in the front row. Caleb stood near the entrance, greeting guests with practiced solemnity, playing the part of the bereaved widower perfectly. But I knew better. I'd seen the bills from the hospice marked pending review. Despite excellent insurance coverage, I'd noticed how he'd taken control of all her social media accounts to spare her the stress. I'd watched him turn away her choir friends when they'd tried to visit, always with reasonable-sounding excuses. The funeral was beginning, but I had the feeling the real performance hadn't started yet. The morning after the funeral rehearsal, I sat at my desk at Harborline Compliance Group, staring at a procurement audit that made my stomach turn. The city of Riverton had awarded several Memorial Stone contracts over the past 2 years, and the winning bidders' invoicing patterns looked suspiciously familiar. Morton Construction and Memorials, Caleb's company, had charged 40% above market rate for premium granite installations at Riverside Cemetery. "Working on the municipal audit?" my colleague Derek asked, peering over my cubicle wall. "Just reviewing the memorial allocations," I replied carefully. "Some interesting patterns in the bidding process." Derek whistled low. "Those headstone contracts? Yeah, I noticed the same vendor keeps winning. Must have good connections at City Hall." Good connections. I photocopied the relevant invoices, my compliance training kicking in. Document everything. Create a paper trail. The same principles I'd learned for corporate investigations applied to personal situations, too. My phone buzzed. A text from Maribel Ortiz. "Can we meet? I have something your mother wanted you to have." An hour later, I sat across from Maribel at a coffee shop 3 blocks from Alder Hospice. She looked tired, the way all hospice workers did, but her eyes were alert and determined. "Your mother was lucid more often than Mr. Morton led people to believe," she began, sliding a small USB drive across the table. On her good days, she was completely clear. She asked me to record some voice messages. My hand trembled as I picked up the drive. Caleb said she was too medicated to communicate coherently in her final weeks. That's what he wanted people to think. Maribel pulled out a manila folder. "These are the timestamps from our facility, showing her lucidity assessments. She scored high on cognitive function tests even 3 days before she passed. She knew exactly what she was doing when she made these recordings." I plugged the USB into my laptop, turning the volume low. My mother's voice, weak but unmistakably clear, filled my earbuds. "My darling Ava, if you're hearing this, it means Caleb has done exactly what I feared. He won't let you speak at my funeral, will he? He's already told me the program is set in stone." Ironic given his business. A weak laugh. "But I have one request. My love, if they won't let you speak, then sing for me. Nearer, my home. You know the one. I taught it to you when you were little. That song is mine, and through you, it will be yours. Don't let him silence us both." The timestamp showed this was recorded 6 weeks ago, when Caleb had been telling everyone she was barely conscious. "There's more," Maribel said quietly. "Your mother's lawyer, Arthur Klein, has been trying to reach you. Caleb's been intercepting the calls at the house." That evening, I drove home to find Caleb in his study, surrounded by funeral planning documents. The itemized bill from the funeral home sat prominently on his desk, nearly $30,000 for what he called a dignified send-off befitting the Morton name. "We need to discuss tomorrow's service," he said without looking up. "I've had several people ask about eulogies. I've made it clear that only approved speakers will have access to the microphone. We can't have emotional outbursts disrupting the live stream." "Mom's old choir friends want to share memories," I said, testing the waters. His pen stopped moving. "Eleanor's past associations aren't relevant to who she became as my wife. The service will reflect her life with me, in this family. That's what matters." "She had a life before you, Caleb." He finally looked up, his eyes cold. "A life she chose to leave behind when she married me. I won't have a bunch of elderly choir members turning the funeral into some amateur hour sing-along. The professional vocalist I hired has performed at the governor's mansion. That's the level of dignity your mother deserves." I bit back my response, thinking of the USB drive now hidden in my car. What about her favorite hymn? "Nearer, My Home"? Surely we could include— "Absolutely not," he stood abruptly. "That hymn isn't in any modern hymnals. No one knows it. We're not turning your mother's funeral into a musicology lesson. The program is final. The printing is done. End of discussion." As I headed to my room, I passed the living room where my mother's photos had already been reorganized. The pictures of her with her choir friends were gone, replaced by images from Caleb's company events and their wedding. Her entire history prior to becoming Mrs. Morton had been edited out. I texted Father Doyle. "Need to understand Mom's final wishes. Can we talk?" His response came quickly. "She left instructions with me and her lawyer, written and witnessed. I think you should see them before tomorrow." Then another text from an unknown number. "This is Arthur Klein, your mother's attorney. I have documents Mr. Morton doesn't know about. Can we meet tonight?" I slipped out while Caleb was on a conference call about tomorrow's live stream logistics. The pieces were falling into place. The hospice recordings, the lawyer's documents, Father Doyle's nervous pocket touching. My mother had orchestrated something, even while fighting cancer and Caleb's controlling behavior. At my car, I made a backup of the USB drive and emailed it to my personal cloud storage. Then I texted my high school friend Sierra, who worked as a paralegal. "Might need your help tomorrow. If something happens at Mom's funeral, call 911. Bridget's has live stream cameras." Compliance work had taught me to prepare for worst-case scenarios. And something told me Caleb's reaction to any deviation from his carefully scripted funeral would reveal exactly why my mother had felt the need to leave secret messages and sealed instructions. The memorial stones at 40% markup, the isolated dying woman, the silenced daughter, the controlled narrative. Tomorrow, at my mother's funeral, the truth would sing out, one way or another. The night before the funeral, I met Arthur Klein at his office downtown. The elderly lawyer's desk was covered with documents bearing my mother's signature, each one dated and notarized with meticulous care. "Your mother was a very intelligent woman," he said, adjusting his glasses. "She came to me 6 weeks ago, completely lucid, with Maribel Ortiz as her witness. She knew exactly what she was doing." He pushed a document across the desk. "This is an addendum to the Eleanor Hart Trust, established before her marriage to Mr. Morton. She was quite specific about its terms." I read through the legal language, my heart pounding. My mother had protected her premarital assets, the house she'd inherited from her parents, her savings accounts, her life insurance policies. More importantly, she'd included a specific clause about interference with final wishes that would trigger immediate transfer of all assets to me if anyone attempted to prevent the execution of her funeral requests. "The total value is approximately $480,000, Arthur continued. "Mr. Morton has been trying to claim control as surviving spouse, but your mother's trust predates their marriage and explicitly excludes him except for a conditional life estate in the house." "Conditional on what?" "On him not engaging in any misconduct toward the beneficiary, that's you, or attempting to override Eleanor's documented final wishes." He pulled out another paper. "Which brings us to this. She left specific funeral instructions with Father Doyle and myself, If anyone prevents you from speaking or participating, you are to sing "Nearer, My Home." She was very clear about this. The pieces clicked together. My mother had laid a trap, and Caleb was about to walk right into it. Back at home, I found Caleb in the kitchen with his assistant, reviewing the funeral timeline on his laptop. The printed programs sat in neat stacks on the counter, every detail micromanaged, every moment choreographed. "Final sound check is at 8 tomorrow morning," his assistant was saying. "The professional vocalist will rehearse with our approved playlist. I've instructed the sound technician to keep all other microphones locked until the designated speaking portions." "Good," Caleb replied. "We can't have any improvisation. This is being streamed to over 300 viewers. My business associates, city council members, everyone who matters will be watching." They didn't notice me slip upstairs. In my room, I prepared everything. Printed copies of the hospice reports showing Mom's lucidity, screenshots of the trust documents, Arthur Klein's business card, the backup USB drives. I tucked one copy into my purse and hid another in my car. My phone buzzed with a text from Father Doyle. "The letter from your mother is in my inner pocket. Canon law protects pastoral communications. He cannot force me to surrender it. Be ready." I pulled up the St. Bridget's website and confirmed what I'd suspected. Their live stream system was new, installed during COVID, and included automatic cloud backup of all services. Whatever happened tomorrow would be preserved. The next morning, Caleb inspected my black dress and approved with a curt nod. "Remember," he said as we drove to the church, "this is about maintaining dignity. Your mother's reputation matters. Any emotional outbursts reflect on the Morton name." "Of course," I replied, thinking of the voice message. "Don't let him silence us both." The chapel filled quickly. I recognized city officials, Caleb's business partners, and there, relegated to the back rows, several members of Mom's old choir. Caleb had placed his people strategically in the front sections, creating a buffer between me and anyone who'd known my mother before her marriage. During the viewing, I noticed Maribel slip in and take a seat near the livestream camera. She made eye contact and nodded slightly. Sierra sat 2 rows behind her, phone in hand. As the service began, I watched Caleb perform his role flawlessly. The grieving widower, the successful businessman honoring his wife with an elaborate send-off. The professional vocalist sang the approved hymns with technical perfection, but no heart. The selected speakers read sanitized eulogies that painted my mother as Mrs. Morton, wife and hostess, erasing Eleanor Hart, the choir singer, the teacher, the woman who hummed hymns during chemo. Father Doyle delivered a sermon about resurrection and new life, his hand occasionally drifting to his inner pocket. The tension in the chapel grew as the service progressed according to Caleb's rigid timeline. Then came the moment Caleb had scripted as final reflections. His assistant moved to the microphone. "Mr. Morton has requested that we maintain the program as printed. We'll now proceed to the final hymn." I stood up. The assistant faltered. Caleb's head snapped toward me, his face a mask of controlled fury. I walked to the aisle, my mother's voice echoing in my memory. Every eye in the chapel followed me. The live stream camera captured it all. The widow's daughter rising, the stepfather's clenched jaw, the priest's hand moving to his pocket. "Sit down," Caleb hissed, loud enough for the front rows to hear. But I was already walking toward the altar, toward my mother's casket, toward the microphone that was supposed to remain locked. The sanctuary held its breath. 300 online viewers watched in real time. The USB drive weighed heavy in my pocket. Father Doyle's fingers found the sealed letter. My mother had asked for one thing, her voice, through mine, singing the hymn that meant everything to her. And Caleb was about to show everyone exactly why she'd needed such elaborate precautions to make it happen. The chapel fell silent as I reached the altar. 300 people in their seats, 300 more watching online, and one stepfather rising from his pew with murder in his eyes. I didn't need the microphone. The acoustics of St. Bridget's had been designed for voices to carry, And my mother had taught me how to project when I was 12, standing beside her in the choir loft. Nearer, my home, to thee, I began, my voice clear and strong, even though it be a cross that raiseth me. A collective intake of breath swept through the chapel. In the back rows, I saw members of Mom's old choir straighten, their eyes filling with recognition. Mrs. Patterson, who'd sung soprano beside my mother for 15 years, pressed a tissue to her face. Still all my song shall be, I continued, finding the melody my mother had hummed in her final days. Nearer, my home, to thee. Caleb was moving now, pushing past the funeral director who tried to intercept him. His face had gone from controlled fury to open rage, the mask of the grieving widower completely shattered. "Stop this immediately," he barked, his voice cutting through the hymn, but I kept singing, stepping closer to my mother's casket, my hand resting on the polished wood. Though like a wanderer, the sun gone down, I sang, my voice growing stronger as members of the choir began to hum along. Darkness be over me, my rest a stone. That's when Caleb reached me. The slap came hard and fast, snapping my head to the side. The sound echoed through the chapel like a gunshot. Someone screamed. The livestream camera captured everything. The force of the blow, my stumble against the casket, the way Caleb grabbed for the microphone stand even though I wasn't using it. "You ungrateful," he caught himself, suddenly aware of the hundreds of eyes on him, the camera recording, the city councilman in the third row. But the damage was done. I straightened, my cheek burning, and found my voice again. Yet in my dreams I continued, my voice now shaking but determined. Nearer, my home, to thee. "Enough!" Caleb lunged again, shoving me hard. I fell against the flower arrangements, white lilies scattering across the floor. The funeral director and 2 ushers rushed forward, but Father Doyle was already there, positioning himself between us. "Mr. Morton," the priest commanded, "this is a house of God. She's destroying everything, the dignity, the reputation." Caleb's carefully constructed persona had completely crumbled. The successful businessman, the grieving widower, replaced by a man who'd just struck a woman at her mother's funeral in front of the entire town. In the back, I heard Sierra's clear voice. 911? Yes, we need police at St. Bridget's Chapel. A man just assaulted someone during a funeral service. The choir had risen to their feet now, and their voices joined mine as I pulled myself up from the flowers. Angels to beckon me, nearer, my home, to thee. "Turn off the camera," Caleb shouted at the technician. But the young man backed away. Hands raised, the live stream continued, broadcasting Caleb's meltdown to everyone who mattered in his carefully constructed world. Father Doyle had pulled out the sealed envelope. "Mr. Morton, I think you should know that Eleanor left specific instructions." "I don't give a damn about her instructions," Caleb roared, then seemed to realize what he'd just said. On camera, at his wife's funeral, in front of 3 city councilmen and dozens of business associates. The chapel doors opened, and 2 uniformed officers entered. Sierra stood beside them, phone still in hand, recording everything for good measure. But I wasn't finished, with the entire choir now singing, their voices lifting the hymn my mother had loved. I sang the final verse, "Nearer, my home, nearer, my home to thee." The last note hung in the air as the officers approached Caleb. The funeral director looked like he might faint. The professional vocalist sat frozen at the piano, and in the front row, Caleb's business associates were already reaching for their phones, no doubt calculating the damage to their association with him. "Sir, we need you to step outside," one officer said. "This is my wife's funeral," Caleb protested, but his voice had lost its authority. He was just a man who'd struck his stepdaughter in a church, on camera, in front of the entire town. As the officers escorted him toward the door, Father Doyle stepped to the microphone I'd never needed. "Perhaps," he said, his voice steady, "we should hear what Eleanor Hart wanted to say." The chapel fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. Not the oppressive control Caleb had imposed, but an expectant hush, waiting for my mother's voice to finally be heard. The camera kept rolling, the choir remained standing, and somewhere in heaven, I knew my mother was singing along. Father Doyle's weathered hands trembled slightly as he broke the seal on my mother's letter. The chapel remained frozen in stunned silence, save for the soft whir of the livestream camera that had captured everything. Caleb's rage, his assault, his arrest, and now this moment of truth. This letter was written by Eleanor Hart 6 weeks before her passing, Father Doyle announced. Witnessed by myself and her attorney, Arthur Klein, who is present today. He nodded toward the lawyer, who stood and confirmed with a solemn nod. The priest cleared his throat and began reading in my mother's words. To my beloved daughter Ava, and to all who have gathered to remember me. If this letter is being read, it means someone has tried to prevent my daughter from honoring my final wish, to hear her sing Nearer, My Home at my funeral. This was the hymn I sang when I first met her father, the song I hummed to her as a baby, and the melody that gave me peace in my final days. Muffled sobs came from the back rows where the choir sat. I touched my still stinging cheek, feeling the heat from Caleb's slap, but also feeling my mother's presence in every word. Father Doyle continued, I know there will be those who question my state of mind. Therefore, I have documented my lucidity with medical professionals at Alder Hospice. Maribel Ortiz, my nurse, can attest that I was of sound mind when I made these requests. I fear my husband has already begun to rewrite my story, to erase who I was before I became Mrs. Morton. But I was Eleanor Hart first, teacher, choir member, mother, and child of God. Maribel stood briefly, nodding her confirmation to the assembled crowd. Several people turned their phones toward her, adding her witness to the digital record already spreading across Riverton's social media. Play the recording, someone called out. It was Mrs. Patterson from the choir. We deserve to hear Eleanor's voice. Father Doyle looked at me, and I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the chapel's sound system with help from the shell-shock technician. My mother's voice, weak but unmistakably clear, filled the sanctuary. My darling Ava, if you're hearing this, it means Caleb has done exactly what I feared. He won't let you speak at my funeral. Will he? The timestamp appeared on the screen. 6 weeks ago, when Caleb had been telling everyone she was barely conscious. But I have one request, my love. If they won't let you speak, then sing for me. Nearer, My Home. You know the one. That song is mine, and through you, it will be yours. Don't let him silence us both. The recording continued. I want everyone to know that I see what's happening, the isolation from my friends, the control over my medical decisions, the way he's already planning to erase my past. But I'm not going quietly. Ava, you've always been my voice when I couldn't speak. Be my voice now. When the recording ended, the chapel erupted, not in chaos, but in revelation. City Councilman Richards was already on his phone, his voice carrying, We need an emergency review of all Morton construction contracts. Business associates slipped out the side doors, distancing themselves from the scandal. The livestream comment feed exploded with outrage and support. Arthur Klein stepped forward. There's more, he announced. Eleanor Hart established a trust before her marriage, protecting her assets for her daughter. Mr. Morton's actions today, the assault, the attempt to suppress Eleanor's final wishes, have triggered the misconduct clause. He has forfeited any claim to Eleanor's estate. Through the windows, I could see Caleb in the back of the police cruiser, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. His carefully constructed world, the grieving widower, the successful businessman, the respected community leader, had crumbled in less than 5 minutes, brought down by a hymn and the truth. Father Doyle returned to the microphone. Perhaps, he said gently, we should honor Eleanor properly now. Would the choir like to join Ava in singing Nearer My Home one more time, the way Eleanor would have wanted? The choir moved forward as one, surrounding me at the altar. Mrs. Patterson took my hand, squeezing gently. "Your mother would be so proud," she whispered. This time, when we sang, it wasn't just my voice or even the choirs. The entire chapel joined in. Voices raised in defiance of control, in celebration of truth, in memory of Eleanor Hart, not Mrs. Ball Morton, but Eleanor Hart, the woman who had planned her own liberation even as cancer claimed her body. The live stream captured it all, the community joining together, the hymn filling the sacred space, the flowers scattered from Caleb's violence now being gathered and placed tenderly on the casket by caring hands. 300 viewers had become 3,000 as the video spread, and with it, the story of Eleanor's final victory. As the last note faded, I knew my mother's revenge was complete. She hadn't needed violence or lawyers or public confrontation. She'd needed only the truth, a song, and the absolute certainty that Caleb's own nature would destroy him the moment he tried to silence her voice. The camera kept rolling, preserving everything for the legal proceedings to come, but in that moment, all that mattered was the song, the truth, and the knowledge that Eleanor Hart's voice would never be silenced again. The Monday after the funeral, I sat in the Riverton Police Department filing a formal assault complaint. The detective taking my statement had already watched the live stream. Apparently, most of the department had. "The video evidence is overwhelming," she said, documenting the bruise on my cheek. "With hundreds of witnesses and multiple camera angles, this is as straightforward as it gets. Mr. Morton is facing assault charges, and with the funeral setting, the prosecutor's considering enhancement for disrupting a religious service." By Tuesday, I'd filed for a restraining order. Sierra accompanied me to court, where Judge Martinez reviewed the footage with barely concealed disgust. "Granted," she said without hesitation, "Mr. Morton is to stay 500 feet away from Ms. Hart, her residence, and her place of employment. Given the public nature of the assault and his apparent anger issues, I'm making this order immediate and extending it for 1 year pending review." But I wasn't done. Wednesday morning, I walked into Harborline Compliance Group with a thick folder and a flash drive. "I need to report a potential conflict of interest," I told my supervisor, Margaret Hollis. "I've discovered irregularities in city contracts that involve my stepfather's company. I documented these before any personal conflict arose, but given recent events, I think an independent review is necessary." Margaret's eyes sharpened as she reviewed the documents, the inflated invoices, the pattern of Morton Construction winning bids at precisely 40% above market rate, the suspicious timing of contract awards. "You documented all this before the funeral incident?" she asked. "My mother was dying. I was looking into her finances and noticed his company's billing patterns. The funeral situation is separate from this professional concern." I handed her the flash drive. "Everything's here. Comparisons to market rates, bid analysis, invoice audits. I've recused myself from any further investigation due to personal involvement." Margaret nodded slowly. "You did the right thing bringing this forward. We'll assign it to the forensic team." She paused. "I'm sorry about your mother, Ava, and about what happened at the funeral. The whole city's talking about it." The live stream had been shared thousands of times. Local news picked up the story. Funeral assault exposes prominent businessman's dark side. The video of Caleb striking me, screaming about dignity while destroying his own, had become viral evidence of his character. Arthur Klein scheduled an emergency meeting that afternoon. "The criminal charges give us leverage," he explained. "Caleb's attorney is already reaching out, trying to negotiate. He wants to contest the trust. Claim your mother wasn't competent when she made changes." "But we have the hospice records," I reminded him. "Exactly. And now we have evidence of his violent temper and controlling behavior. No judge will side with a man who assaulted his stepdaughter at her mother's funeral." He pulled out more documents. "I've been investigating further. Your mother started documenting things months ago. Emails where Caleb discussed managing her social media, records of him turning away visitors, even a recording from her phone of him saying her old friends weren't good for her recovery. My mother had been building a case, even while fighting cancer. By Thursday, the city auditor's office had opened a formal investigation into Morton Construction. My documented evidence, combined with the public scandal, had triggered a comprehensive review of all city contracts. Councilman Richards, who'd witnessed the funeral assault, personally ensured the investigation would be thorough. "We can't have city contractors who behave this way," he told reporters. "The viral video shows Mr. Morton's true character. If he can act that way at his wife's funeral, how can we trust him with public funds?" Caleb's business partners fled like rats from a sinking ship. 3 major contracts were suspended pending review. His construction crews reported not being paid as his accounts were frozen during the investigation. Friday brought a call from the prosecutor's office. "Ms. Hart, we're moving forward with criminal charges. The funeral home's multiple cameras captured everything from different angles. We've had over 50 witnesses come forward, including several city officials. Mr. Morton's attorney is pushing for a plea deal." "What kind of deal?" I asked. "He's offering to plead no contest to assault in exchange for no jail time, just probation and anger management." I thought of my mother, planning her final moves while cancer ravaged her body. "What do you recommend?" "Honestly, take it to trial. With that video evidence and the enhancement for disrupting a funeral, he's looking at potential jail time, but it's your choice." That evening, I sat in my mother's house, my house now, according to the trust, and played her voice messages again, in one I hadn't heard before. She spoke directly about this moment. "Ava, honey, if you're listening to this, it means the plan worked. I know Caleb. I've watched him isolate me, control me, manage my death like one of his construction projects, but he made one mistake. He underestimated us both. He thought my illness made me weak, thought your compliance work made you passive. He never realized that patience and documentation are weapons too. Every cruel word, every blocked visitor, every financial manipulation. I recorded what I could. You'll find the rest. Show them who he really is. Not for revenge, but for truth. Love you always. Mom." I forwarded the recording to the prosecutor. Let Caleb try to explain that to a jury. His dying wife documenting his abuse while he told everyone she was too medicated to think clearly. The restraining order was in place. The criminal charges were filed. The city investigation was underway. And somewhere in Riverton, Caleb Morton sat in his empty office, his reputation destroyed, his business crumbling, his true nature exposed to everyone who mattered. All because he couldn't let my mother's voice be heard. All because he had to maintain control, even over a dying woman's final wish. The hymn had done its work. The truth was singing now, loud and clear, in courtrooms and city offices and social media feeds across Riverton. The probate courtroom was packed on the day of the hearing. Word had spread through Riverton that Caleb Morton was challenging the trust, and half the town seemed to want a front-row seat to his continued downfall. Judge Helen Crawford, known for her no-nonsense approach to estate law, reviewed the stack of documents before her with careful attention. Caleb sat at the defendant's table, a shadow of his former self. His attorney, a sharp-dressed man from the state capitol, had clearly advised him to appear contrite. Dark suit, no jewelry, eyes downcast. But I could see the rage simmering beneath the surface, the fury of a man whose control had been systematically stripped away. Arthur Klein stood to present our case. "Your Honor, we submit the Eleanor Hart Trust, established in 2016 with an addendum added 6 weeks before Mrs. Hart's passing. The addendum specifically addresses disbursement conditions and includes a comprehensive misconduct clause." He presented the hospice documentation, lucidity assessments, physician statements, timestamps showing my mother was fully competent when she made her final arrangements. Then came Maribel Ortiz, who testified under oath about my mother's mental clarity. "Mrs. Hart knew exactly what she was doing," Maribel stated firmly. "She asked me to witness her signatures, to verify the times and dates. She said, 'They'll try to claim I was too sick to think clearly. I need you to be my proof that I wasn't.'" Caleb's attorney tried to object. but Judge Crawford waved him down. "I'll hear all relevant testimony about the deceased's mental state." Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Arthur introduced the livestream footage into evidence, not just of the funeral assault, but with audio enhancement that captured Caleb's words clearly. "I don't give a damn about her instructions." "Your Honor," Arthur continued, "the trust's misconduct clause specifically mentions interference with final wishes and acts of violence or coercion against beneficiaries. Mr. Morton's assault on Ms. Hart at the funeral, his public declaration that he didn't care about Eleanor's instructions, and the evidence of systematic isolation and control all trigger this clause." The judge turned to Caleb's attorney. "Your response?" "My client was grieving. Your Honor, his actions, while regrettable, were born of emotional distress at an already difficult time. He should not lose his marital rights because of one moment of poor judgment." "One moment?" I couldn't help but speak up. Arthur placed a calming hand on my arm, but Judge Crawford nodded for me to continue. "Your Honor, may I present additional evidence?" The judge considered, then nodded. "Proceed." I handed over the USB drive containing all of my mother's recordings. "Your Honor, these are voice messages my mother left over her final months. They document a pattern of financial control, isolation, and emotional abuse. We played 3 recordings. In one, my mother described how Caleb had changed her passwords and taken control of her social media. In another, she detailed how he'd turned away her choir friends, claiming visits would tire her unnecessarily. The third, recorded just days before her death, was the most damning. "He's already planning my funeral like a business merger. No choir friends, no nearer, my home, no mention of who I was before I became Mrs. Morton. He actually said, and I quote, 'Your past life isn't relevant anymore, but it is relevant. It's who I am, and I won't let him erase me.'" The courtroom was silent as my mother's words hung in the air. Even Caleb's attorney looked uncomfortable. But the real blow came from an unexpected source. Councilman Richards had submitted an affidavit about the city's investigation into Morton Construction. While not directly related to the trust, it painted a picture of systematic fraud, invoices padded by 40%, substandard materials billed as premium, a pattern of deception that supported our claims about Caleb's character. "Your Honor," Arthur summarized, "Eleanor Hart knew who her husband was. She took steps to protect her legacy and her daughter. The trust is valid. The addendum is clear. And Mr. Morton's own actions have triggered the misconduct clause. The assault at the funeral wasn't a moment of grief. It was the culmination of a pattern of control that Eleanor documented extensively before her death." Judge Crawford reviewed her notes, then looked directly at Caleb. "Mr. Morton, do you have anything to say on your own behalf?" Caleb stood slowly, his composure finally cracking. "That woman," he spat, pointing at me, "destroyed everything I built, my reputation, my business, my standing in this community." "Mr. Morton," the judge interrupted coldly, "you're referring to the consequences of your own actions, which were broadcast live to hundreds of witnesses. Please continue." But Caleb had revealed himself again. Instead of grief, instead of remorse, he showed only rage at losing control. The judge had seen enough. "The court finds the Eleanor Hart Trust and its addendum to be valid and enforceable, given the documented evidence of misconduct, including assault, attempted suppression of the deceased's final wishes, and a pattern of controlling behavior. Mr. Morton forfeits any claim to the trust assets. Furthermore, his life estate in the Hart family home is revoked under the terms clearly stated in the addendum." She continued, "All assets specified in the trust, the house at 451 Riverside Drive, the savings accounts totaling approximately $300,000, and the life insurance policies valued at $180,000, are awarded solely to Ava Hart. Mr. Morton has 30 days to vacate the premises." Caleb's attorney tried one last objection about marital property rights, but Judge Crawford cut him off. "Mr. Morton should be grateful this court deals only with civil matters. His criminal issues and the city's fraud investigation are separate proceedings that may have far more serious consequences. As we left the courthouse, reporters were waiting. The story had evolved from funeral assault to widow's revenge from beyond the grave. My mother's careful planning exposed alongside Caleb's corruption. "Ms. Hart," one reporter called out, "how does it feel to know your mother protected you even after her death?" I thought of my mother's voice, weak but determined, planning every detail while cancer ravaged her body. "She always protected me," I said simply. "She just made sure the protection would outlast her, and she let Caleb destroy himself with his own choices." Behind us, Caleb emerged from the courthouse to face more questions about the city investigation. 3 more contractors had come forward with evidence of bid rigging. His construction empire, built on inflated invoices and backroom deals, was crumbling as surely as his public image had shattered against the altar of St. Brigid's. My mother's revenge was complete, not through violence or deception, but through truth, patience, and the perfect trap that let Caleb reveal exactly who he was to everyone who mattered. The morning news played on my phone as I stood outside the courthouse for the final time. The reporter's voice carried across the plaza. "Disgraced businessman Caleb Morton faces additional charges as the city auditor's investigation reveals systematic overbilling in municipal contracts spanning 5 years." Behind me, the courthouse doors opened. Caleb emerged with his drastically different legal team, the high-powered attorney replaced by a harried public defender. The criminal assault trial had been swift. With the livestream evidence and 57 witnesses, the jury had deliberated for less than an hour. Guilty, 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management, and a permanent criminal record that would bar him from any future city contracts. "Ms. Hart," a reporter called out, recognizing me. "Any comment on Mr. Morton's conviction?" I turned to face the cameras one last time. My mother believed in truth. She documented it, preserved it, and ensured it would be heard. Today's verdict isn't about revenge, it's about accountability. The reporter pressed on. "The city audit revealed over $2 million in overcharges. Your compliance work helped expose this. Do you feel vindicated?" "I feel grateful," I said simply. Grateful that our systems worked, that evidence mattered, that a dying woman's voice could still demand justice. I walked away from the courthouse, leaving Caleb to face questions about his collapsed business empire. Morton Construction's assets had been frozen pending criminal fraud charges. His business partners had scattered. The mansion he'd bought with inflated contract money was in foreclosure. The man who'd controlled every detail of my mother's funeral now couldn't control his own narrative. That afternoon, I stood in St. Brigid's Chapel again, the same space where Caleb had struck me, where my mother's voice had finally rung out through mine. But today was different. Today, the Riverton Community Choir was holding a memorial concert. Eleanor Hart Memorial Sing-Along. Mrs. Patterson had organized it. "Your mother loved this music," she'd told me. "Let's fill this space with joy, not violence." The chapel overflowed with people, not just the choir, but nurses from Alder Hospice, employees from Harborline Compliance Group, even some of the city officials who'd witnessed the funeral. Father Doyle opened with a prayer, then nodded to me. I stood at the microphone, the same one Caleb had tried to keep me from. My mother wanted her voice heard, thanks to all of you. But she also wanted other voices lifted. So today, let's sing together. Let's make this chapel ring with the joy she found in music. We sang for an hour, hymns, folk songs, even some contemporary pieces the younger choir members suggested. But we ended, of course, with "Nearer, My Home." This time, no one tried to stop us. This time, the live stream captured celebration instead of violence. As the last notes faded, Maribel Ortiz approached. "Your mother would be so proud. She told me once that revenge served cold wasn't her style. She preferred justice served with documentary evidence." I laughed, the first real laugh since Mom's diagnosis. "She got both, didn't she?" "She did indeed." That evening, I sat in my mother's house, my house now, surrounded by boxes of her recordings, documents, and photos Caleb had tried to hide. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Arthur Klein. "Final paperwork," he said, handing me an envelope. The last life insurance policy cleared. Also, the prosecutor called. Caleb took a plea deal on the fraud charges, 3 years minimum security, full restitution to the city, lifetime ban on public contracts. Prison. The word felt heavy and final. "Your mother knew it might come to this," Arthur said gently. "She left you one more recording, said to give it to you only after everything was settled." I played it after he left, my mother's voice filling the kitchen where she'd once hummed while cooking. "My dearest Ava, if you're hearing this, then the plan worked better than I dared hope. I know you might feel guilty about Caleb's fate. Don't. He chose his path with every controlling act, every cruel word, every stolen moment with my friends. I just made sure there would be consequences. But here's the important part. Sweetheart, don't let this define you. I spent my last months planning justice, but you get to spend your years living freely. Sing whenever you want. Speak your truth. Never let anyone silence your voice. I'm free now, truly free. And thanks to you, my brave girl, my voice lives on. Not in revenge, but in truth. Not in bitterness, but in song. Take the house, take the money, take the lessons, and build a life where no one controls your narrative. All my love forever and always, Mom. P.S. The choir could use a new alto, just saying. I smiled through tears, my mother's final gift not being the money or the house, but the freedom to use my voice without fear. Tomorrow, I'd call Mrs. Patterson about joining the choir. Tonight, I'd sit in my mother's house, our house, and hum "Nearer My Home" while sorting through photos of happier times. The live stream of the funeral had been viewed over 1 million times, shared as a cautionary tale about control, abuse, and the power of truth. But I didn't need to watch it again. I'd lived it, survived it, and emerged with my voice intact. My phone buzzed with a text from Sierra. "Celebration dinner tomorrow? My treat. We can toast your mom and discuss that promotion Margaret Hollis mentioned. Lead compliance investigator has a nice ring to it." I texted back, "Yes, Mom would approve. She always said the best revenge is a life well lived." Outside, the bells of St. Brigid's chimed the hour. Inside, I was finally home, finally free, finally able to sing as loudly as I wanted. My mother's revenge was complete. Served not with coldness but with choruses, not with bitterness but with beautiful, undeniable truth. The song was over. The truth had won. And somewhere, I knew, Eleanor Hart was singing still. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Ava's situation? Let me know in the comments.